He took her in on a stormy night without asking a single question, unaware that her past was tied to the one name that still haunted him, a stranger, a secret, and a truth that would change everything forever. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The storm came out of nowhere, the kind that swallowed the Montana plains in gray sheets of rain and made the world feel smaller than it was. The rancher had been repairing a broken fence when he saw her walking along the dirt road. Head down, coat soaked through, boots dragging like each step hurt. She looked wrong against the open land, too fragile for the weather, too alone for a place that demanded strength. He didn't think much before driving the truck toward her. When he rolled down the window and asked if she needed help, she flinched, then nodded. He told her to get in, and she did, hands trembling as if she expected him to change his mind. He brought her to the ranch house, a solid wooden place built by his father decades ago. Inside, the smell of coffee and old pine filled the air. He handed her a towel, pointed her to the chair near the fire, and said she could warm up. He didn't ask where she came from or why she was walking alone in a storm. He had learned long ago that some people needed silence more than questions. She introduced herself as Clara, her voice quiet but steady, and thanked him like the words mattered deeply. He noticed how she kept glancing at the door, as if ready to run. That first night, he made soup and left it on the table, pretending not to watch as she ate slowly, carefully, like someone unused to full meals. Her eyes took in everything, the worn floorboards, the family photos on the wall, the rifle above the fireplace memorizing exits and threats. When he offered her the spare room, she hesitated, then accepted, clutching her bag as though it held her entire life. He told her she could stay until the storm passed. She nodded, but something in her expression suggested she hadn't planned beyond surviving the night. Morning came cold and clear. Clara was already awake, standing outside when he stepped onto the porch, staring at the endless land like she was trying to decide if it was freedom or another kind of trap. She asked if there was work she could do, said she didn't want charity. He told her he could always use help around the ranch. She smiled faintly, relief softening her face. Throughout the day, she repaired old tack, cleaned the barn, and followed instructions with quiet focus. Still, every distant engine made her tense, and she kept her back to the wall whenever possible. As days passed, Clara settled into a routine. She rose before sunrise, brewed coffee, and worked until her hands were raw. The rancher noticed scars on her wrists and a faint bruise she tried to hide beneath her sleeve. He didn't comment. He had his own history with pain, one carved deep by loss. 10 years earlier, his younger brother had died in a freak accident out on the range, leaving behind unanswered questions and a silence that never fully lifted. Since then, the ranch had been his refuge and his burden, a place where he didn't have to explain his solitude. Evenings were quiet. They ate together but spoke little, sharing space rather than stories. Clara listened more than she talked, absorbing his habits, his moods. She seemed most at ease with the animals, brushing horses and feeding calves with a gentleness that surprised him. Sometimes, he caught her smiling softly, as if the simple work steadied something inside her. Other times, he saw fear flicker across her face for no obvious reason. At night, he heard her footsteps pacing the room above his, restless and unsure. One evening, a distant truck backfired on the road, and Clara dropped the plate she was holding. It shattered on the floor. She froze, breath shallow, eyes wide with panic. The rancher spoke calmly, telling her it was just noise, just the wind playing tricks. Slowly, she nodded, embarrassed, apologizing over and over. He told her it didn't matter, and swept up the pieces himself. Later, she thanked him again, voice shaking. He realized then that whatever she had run from was still chasing her in her mind. The storm returned a week later, louder and closer than before. Thunder shook the house, rattling windows and memories. Near midnight, he heard a cry from the spare room. When he reached her door, Clara was sitting upright in bed, drenched in sweat, eyes unfocused. She didn't seem to see him at first. Then she reached out, gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. Her lips trembled as she whispered a name, barely audible over the thunder. Ethan. The sound of it hit him like a blow to the chest. He stood there, frozen, the room spinning as his brother's name echoed in his head. No one on the ranch spoke that name anymore. Clara slowly came back to herself, realizing what she had said. Her eyes filled with fear, not just of the storm, but of what she had revealed. She pulled her hand away, apologizing, saying she didn't know why she said it. The rancher said nothing, his heart pounding. He helped her lie back down, told her she was safe, and left the room before his questions could spill out. That night, sleep never came. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at the old photograph of his brother on the wall. How could a stranger know that name? What thread connected her past to his deepest wound? Outside, the rain eased, but inside the ranch, something had shifted. Taking her in without questions had felt right at the time. Now, he sensed that her arrival was no accident and that the answers waiting ahead would change them both forever. Morning light crept through the kitchen window, pale and uncertain, matching the rancher's thoughts. Clara came down late, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and regret. She moved carefully, as if afraid one wrong step would send her back into the night she had escaped. He poured coffee for both of them, the familiar routine grounding him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he asked her where she had heard that name. The question was gentle, but it carried years of buried grief. Clara's hands tightened around the mug, and she stared into the dark liquid as if the answers lived there. She began slowly, explaining that years ago she had been trapped in a life she never chose, controlled by a man who used fear like a weapon. One night, she tried to run and failed. The man who stopped the beating, who stood between her and the world she feared, was named Ethan. He had been working nearby, passing through on a short-term ranch job. He didn't ask questions then either. He drove her to safety, gave her money, and promised to return once things settled. Clara waited for him for months, believing his word was the one solid thing in her life. The rancher listened in silence, his chest tightening with each detail. The man she described sounded exactly like his brother, reckless in courage, stubbornly kind, always stepping into trouble for someone else. He remembered Ethan leaving one summer, saying he needed to clear his head and take temporary work out west. He never returned. When the accident happened, the official story had felt incomplete, but grief had made the questions too painful to chase. Now, Clara's story filled the empty spaces with both pride and sorrow. Clara confessed she had never meant to speak the name. The nightmare had pulled it from her without warning. When she realized where she was and who the rancher might be, fear rushed in. She worried he would think she was lying, or worse, that he would send her away. She said she hadn't come searching for answers or connections. She had only been running, following roads until she couldn't anymore. Hearing this, the rancher felt a strange calm settle over him. For the first time in years, his brother felt close, not lost. They walked together later that day, following a narrow path toward the small hill behind the barn. The grave was simple, marked by a wooden cross, weathered by time. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the distant sounds of cattle and open sky. Clara stopped a few steps back, as if unsure she was allowed there. The rancher nodded, inviting her forward. She knelt, placing a handful of wildflowers at the base of the cross, tears falling without restraint. She whispered words meant only for Ethan, words of gratitude and farewell. Standing beside her, the rancher spoke aloud memories he had never shared: childhood fights, shared dreams, the anger he carried after the loss. Saying the words felt like opening a window in a room long sealed. Clara listened, understanding the weight of loving someone who saved you and left too soon. In that shared silence, grief transformed into something gentler. They were not bound by blood, but by the same absence, the same kindness that had touched both their lives through one man. Life on the ranch slowly found a new rhythm. Clara, no longer startled at every sound, she laughed more, especially with the animals, and her eyes began to hold light instead of constant fear. The rancher noticed how naturally she fit into the space, as if she had always belonged there. He offered her a permanent place, not as charity, but as family. She accepted with quiet emotion, finally believing she could stop running. Together, they repaired fences, shared meals, and spoke of the future without dread. As seasons changed, so did their understanding of home. The rancher realized that taking Clara in had not been a coincidence, but a continuation of his brother's legacy. Ethan's kindness had returned to him through her, teaching him that loss could still lead to connection. Clara found peace in knowing that the man who saved her had been loved deeply, and that his spirit lived on in the land and the people he left behind. What began as a stormy encounter on a lonely road ended as something steady in Lastenia family built not by chance, but by compassion.